All right, this is another episode of MapChat. Today I'm joined by YNEL, creator of Canopy. How you doing?
Hey, nice to be here.
So,
Uh,
yes,
yeah,
how did you get into Counter-Strike originally?
well, about like it depends because there were two different stages in which I got into Counter-Strike. Because originally, the first time I started playing the game, I was about 12 years old, and it was
Sure.
in primary school. My friends got me into it, unsurprisingly, but I didn't really gain that big of an interest in Counter-Strike back then.
Hmm.
And a couple years later, I've come back to it, and it was actually mostly thanks to mapping itself.
All right.
I uh, I played a couple games and I started playing with friends once again, but probably wouldn't have stuck around for long if I didn't
Hmm.
start making maps. That was back in 2017, I think.
So, when you say you started earlier, was that CS:GO still, or was it earlier? Was it Source?
CS:GO.
So,
It was not Source.
okay,
I've played a fair bit of it, but I started well into CS:GO's
sure.
lifespan.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I was talking to Coachy last week, and he said, yeah, he had the same thing of he started, I think it was in 1.6, but didn't really play it. You know, he was just watching his cousin play it
uh
or whatever, and then started a lot later and sort of got into it with mapping as well, which I think is interesting that people sort of often, I think maybe with creative types, you need like a creative outlet that's more than just the Counter Strike, which I think is really cool.
yeah, no, absolutely. I I don't think I would ever play a game without having that aspect to it.
Yeah, so how did you get into mapping? Do you do game design in another context, or is it purely you started in Counter Strike?
Well, I don't. I think I back around that time I did some like experimenting with Unity and Unreal Engine and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot, but like I was like 13 years old and I wasn't exactly someone
Sure.
experienced. So it was mostly just for fun, and after that, having discovered the fact that CS:GO had a map editor was what made me so interested in the whole thing.
Mm.
Without that, I probably would be into some other stuff. Because I remember around that time I was mostly doing music,
All
so
right.
terrible music because I was 13 years old once
Sure.
again.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But mapping is my first like proper stuff that I started doing for video games.
So, what kind of music was that? Was that like electronic music or
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
analog?
It was well, I have a lot of training on the piano,
Right.
but I
Okay.
haven't played the piano for like the last 4 or 5 years, unfortunately. But either way, the first like around that time, I was mostly just doing electronic music, very uninspired, boring electronic music. Uh, Now that it would definitely be very different.
Sure. But I mean, yeah, like it's all digital skills in it. Do you find that the sort of skills around sound design in music stuff has that helped you in mapping? Any other skills from the music side helped you?
I don't think there's a specific skill when it comes to music, but I do feel like I have quite a few interests in like different creative fields.
Mm-hmm.
Like right now, I'm doing a lot of illustration. I've studied some animation. I have done some music previously, and obviously, I'm doing stuff for video games right
Yeah.
now. It's I feel like there is a sort of connection between them and the way you think about creating stuff. There isn't like a specific skill,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like it did contribute in some sense as to how I think about mapping and how I approach it nowadays.
Mm. I think yeah, because I'm similar in that I do a lot of creative things, and I do feel like there's one of the things I've noticed as I've got into more and more disciplines is I have a process of a how to learn them, and then b what my output looks like. Like I'll notice that there's a commonality of something intangible. I'm like, okay, these all like there's all the same thing I don't like in all of them, and things that I
Yeah.
do like in all of them. Do you find that as well, where you've got you can sort of feel your creative through line through different disciplines.
I do feel like there's a lot of uniqueness to them all, but I also see some of those same aspects like come up.
Mm-hmm.
But what I did notice with mapping is that I'm a lot more restrained when it comes to mapping. Like my taste in music and the way I would do music is definitely a lot more experimental. And with
Mm-hmm.
maps, I feel like I am trying to be more mindful of what others did and learning from others a bit more and try to not just go on my own and do whatever I want, which is interesting
All right.
change that I noticed.
Yeah. Do you find that that's is that to do with being in a community of other people, or is there sort of there were certain people you looked up to when you started mapping?
I think that's one of the like most interesting things because I don't really have anyone I'm really looking up to when it comes to environment art and level design and stuff like that. For some reason, I always just felt like I'm part of the community and I never felt like I was below someone,
Mm-hmm.
even though obviously there are like people who are more and less successful, it doesn't matter. It's I did feel like when I'm interacting with others that I'm on the same level as them, at least at this point, even if I'm not nearly as experienced. And I don't really have this like exactly who I'm looking up to, but I just feel like there's this common understanding of mapping and common ideas that I really want to like also take over and show in my own skills, you know?
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. I mean, like the mapping community is so weirdly small in that, like, you go in. I feel like when you start, you go in, you go right. There's these amazing mappers. They're the ones who get it in the game, and then 10,000 tiers below is me, and I'm starting. And then within a few months, you go, oh, okay, this guy that I actually was hanging out with in playtests, okay, he's actually just got a map in the game.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
just like that. It's that small. Do you find that size was encouraging?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like if it wasn't for the size, I probably would not have stuck around for this long with mapping. Uh, but I really enjoyed that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Um, so, do you want to talk me through your map making history? Because I know you've sort of made a lot, and like you said, you started in 2017.
Yeah.
Were you in exotic places? Uh,
I did
yeah, go on.
I did start making something for exotic places that was kind of a disaster.
Sure.
But that was like my first proper project. Like before that I started like making smaller whatevers that I was just like having fun with.
Mm-hmm.
And when exotic places came around, I started trying to make something proper, something nice. I quickly realized I was not cut out to do it, and I wasn't good at all. But it was my first like actual experience, and I also kind of made a fool out of myself with my MapCore posts. Hopefully, no one sees them nowadays.
Okay.
Uh, but yes, that
Was it
was
YNEL, the new FM phone? Is that the title?
probably not, but maybe I thought of myself as a as that at some point. Uh, yeah, I think the map that I made for that competition wasn't exactly the most incredible of maps, but I did feel like it was encouraging for me
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of the feedback that I got on it was surprisingly decent, even though it was garbage. And to this day, it's a garbage map. I
Okay.
still feel like I have some sort of connection to that map.
Mm-hmm.
It was Hillside, and yes, after that, I quickly moved on to not doing anything for one more year, and then coming back later with just once again with another competition, but that time was the SE Wingman competition, and that was the first time I actually made a map that I felt like I could be proud of,
Mm-hmm.
which was Aurora.
All right. Okay.
Uh, Even though it didn't do that well in the competition, I think it was the 20th maybe, but I still do feel like I was quite proud of what I made.
Hmm.
And after that, thanks to that competition, I got to work a lot with Twinny, and we made quite a few maps together.
Hmm.
Well, here it's a bit spotty and all over the place, but uh, I helped rework the pithead layout, which was also in the Wingman contest. Uh, and after that, we started making a 5v5 map together that we never finished, which was the Mar. And then we made Gracia,
Okay.
which was like one of the first like times we finished the map, and it was like he he still thinks that it wasn't good enough to get in the game, but I do feel like it was like up to that standard. Maybe not the greatest looking map of all time, but definitely
Mhm.
up to the standard of maybe it could have gotten in the game. But unfortunately, it was finished around the time CS:GO was getting to the end of its lifetime,
Right. Okay.
so it didn't live for very long. Uh,
And then you didn't fancy porting it over.
yeah, yeah.
Fair enough.
I mean, I think I started on port, but we had different visions of it. I
Right.
felt like if I just upgraded the visuals a bit here and there, uh, that would be enough. But he he wants a bit more from that, so
Hmm.
I completely respect that, and I think it's perfectly fine. Maybe one day we'll do it. I don't know.
So how is it working with a partner? Because it sounds like you work with Twinning on a number of projects, and so sort of that consistent partnership. How did that work? Did you enjoy that?
It's a really interesting thing because working with someone the way you work with Twinny is basically like having a friend,
Hmm.
because he's my friend, obviously,
Right.
and it's a lot. It's not exactly a work environment. We throw whatever we want at each other, and then you know
Hmm.
the end result is the end result. So it's definitely not the kind of experience I will have if I start to work professionally.
Right. I see. So it was. Did you know him before you started mapping together, or
No, I did not. We met each other through mapping.
okay? So yes, you sort of you built this friendship on mapping, but then it overtook your professional pursuits, and you get distracted.
To a to a certain extent, I guess, but I it's not like till recently I wouldn't even be good enough to be get into any kind of professional
Right.
work environment. Maybe now with Memento getting in the game and working on Canopy will definitely boost my chances,
Hmm.
because it's mostly a solo project for me. And
So sorry. Tell me about Memento.
yeah, Memento. Memento was a weird project for me personally because with Memento, I unfortunately did not work that much on Memento. I think I've been pretty transparent about that one. I made some like throughout them making the map. I made some concepts here and there,
Okay.
helped them figure this and that out. But like I didn't wasn't super involved in the project, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah. I think you'd say in music you
because
were in the room. Right.
yeah, kind of, I guess. But it was because I was at that time I was finishing high school when it began working, and I
Hmm.
really had to finish focus on my studies. And after that, I was moving to the Netherlands, which was a completely different kind of difficulty, and I just
Sure.
did not have any time whatsoever to think of mapping. So I contributed what I could, which wasn't a lot.
Hmm. So for those who don't know, Memento was it was the first. It was in the first round of community maps added, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was.
Alongside the whatever the one in the airport was called. In
Uh,
in the wingman section.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hold up, I'm drawing a blank.
It's fine. Sure.
Assembly. It was
Assembly,
assembly.
of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Um. Yeah, and so I mean, like you say, you weren't necessarily majorly involved in that, but was that because when I talked to Kochi last week, we were talking a bit about when he got climb in the game, and I'm not going to push too hard, but I will ask, what is the what is it like getting the email from Valve? Anything you can tell us? I don't know. I don't know how much you were privy to. If you were sort of, on the edge
I
of the
mean,
team. But
I mean, I can tell that it feels great, when you get an invite from Valve and them telling you, hey, your map is getting in the game. That's kind of an awesome feeling.
mm-hmm.
I don't think there's, any surprise to that. So, but to me, I think there was like it was very interesting because of how little I've worked on Memento. There was a part of me that obviously I felt really happy for it getting in the game, and there's like absolutely nothing like surprising about that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a certain kind of imposter syndrome that comes
Sure,
along
yeah.
with getting a map accepted into the game that you didn't work that much on. I think I battled with that quite a bit at the beginning of working on Canopy. So,
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, obviously you've been very upfront about it, so I wouldn't worry too much. But and I would say from what I've seen of Canopy as well, it's not like you're a bum that was sort of hanging around. You do know what you're doing.
yeah, no,
Generally.
I think, generally speaking, I think the reason Canopy is the way it is because of Memento, is because of that imposter syndrome, and is because of the fact that I'm trying to prove to myself that I am not just the kind of bum that just hangs around and does nothing. So,
So was that part of your impetus to do this alone, or
I
largely on your own?
I think part of it definitely was, but there were many contributing factors to it.
Mm-hmm.
I had a difficult time finding a team
Mm-hmm.
for Canopy, and I started working on it with a friend, but unfortunately, we quickly realized that we are not compatible to work on a map together,
Sure,
even though we
yeah.
don't dislike each other at all.
Mm-hmm.
It's clear that we have different mindsets about it, and it's just,
Yeah, you
not
didn't
going
want
to
to
work out
destroy your
properly.
friendship over mapping.
It's not, I don't think it would destroy the friendship, but the map would definitely not be coming
Right.
along really nicely
Okay.
because we'd have heated discussions regarding it. Um, and after that, I kind of just split off and started working on it on my own as much as I could. Here and there, people joined the project, but unfortunately, I haven't found anyone who's like super experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So even with Darivan joining the project,
Mm-hmm.
he's really great,
Because he's
and
working on a few, isn't he?
yeah,
Mm.
he's working on Citadel as well, but he's really inexperienced, and that's perfectly fine. I think he has a lot of potential. It's just that I can't provide him with too much coaching from my part because it's still difficult to have the project progress the way I want it to progress with having to coach someone next
Sure.
to it as well. So he gets done what he can get done with under my terrible leadership. Uh, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess that's a good place to segue into Canopy. How did it start? Did you start with like the aesthetic concept? Did you start with a design idea? Sort of, where did it start? Did it start after the contest, before the contest?
After the contest, I kind of had a different project that could have happened for the contest,
Mm-hmm.
but I because there was a CS:GO map that I made under the same theme, I decided not to
Yeah.
do that because that would be kind of iffy. Uh, and basically, the way Canopy just came around was like me and Quan, the guy who we started the map together with,
Mm-hmm.
sat down and just started, throwing ideas at the wall and seeing what do we like, what do we don't not like. And one of the things that I very quickly was quick to make sure of was I want a map that is not set in Europe and Japan, and Japan specifically, because I know whenever people think of exotic places and big adventures, so many people are going to make a Japan map. So I want
Mm-hmm.
to make something that's not a Japan map. And one of the places that really piqued my interest was Indonesia because there are practically no Indonesian video game maps like anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it really makes me feel like I could create something unique and original. And that's why we decided on that. The theme changed a lot, like back and forth, ever since we like came up with the first ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was the original idea was based on a place called Sacred Forest Monkey Sanctuary, uh, or Sacred Monkey Forest Sanctuary, in Bali, Indonesia. Really cool place. Really funny name, and that was basically the start for it.
Yeah, I feel like I remember seeing. Do you remember the? There was someone who made a video reviewing all the maps. They went through like all the
Yeah,
100
yeah,
submissions or whatever. I feel like I saw the grey box on that video for Canopy,
yeah.
and I feel like it did look very different back then.
Oh, it did. It did. It definitely did. Though, well, it's not just the conceptualization. This is one of the biggest benefits of doing a solo map.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have to discuss it with anyone,
Yeah.
and you can kind of just like try on your own as much as you like until you feel like you've got it right. Right? You can change as much as you like, and sometimes you will get something, and sometimes you won't. The uh, the gray box was the gray box stages of Canopy changed so much over the time, and at the end of it, when I started working on the actual detailing, I kind of just went over the map from the beginning again without really thinking about without really trying to hold myself to the original layout and original ideas, just trying to like make something that is visually appealing to me. And that's also another benefit of working alone. I don't have a separate level designer who I'd have to confine to,
Yeah.
and I'm the level designer of the map as well. So if I make a gameplay change, that's completely on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was perfectly fine with that. So when I started working on the visual aspect of Canopy, like properly, and wasn't just like with ideas, uh, I basically completely disregarded what I made before.
Sure. So, yeah, I guess that's a good question. One of the things I find difficult is knowing when to move from grey box to the arting stage. With ones I've done in the past, it's either way too quickly into arting because I got bored. There's one at the moment which has gone through like a lot of playtesting and is still not really ready for even the first art pass. And then my contest one, which I am bored of, and so I've just started arting it, and it plays fine. It's not anything revolutionary, but it is a 3-lane
Yeah.
map that works. So I was like, I'll just art it and make it look as pretty as I can. Yeah, for you, when did you feel like, did you just go, right, we're in stage 2, I'm just going to start arting? Or was there a point at which you feel like it played particularly nicely, and sort of how did you feel that out?
I think there wasn't. I think Canopy worked pretty fine for most of its time after I did the original couple of layouts. I had a rough time at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
but after that I figured something out and it works fine. But I still kept changing the layout because of the way I did the art and because of the way I thought about the map itself. I don't feel like there was like a exact point when I started doing the art and when I started ignoring the layout,
Mm-hmm.
because I already started working on the art itself the second we started working on the map. I
Right.
made quite a few assets.
Right. Okay.
Almost none of them are in the map right now. Almost all of them have been replaced. But generally speaking, when I when the stage 2 came around, I thought, okay, the map works gameplay wise. People like it gameplay wise, but I'm unsatisfied with some parts of it a little bit. So let's change that a little bit. Let's try to clean up some areas. And at the end was that I basically remade the entire map with the base layout being the exact same. Just, all those small stuff, like none of the block out really made it into the actual map later on. Everything changed a little bit, moved around,
Mm-hmm.
shifted, and obviously after that, I once again I'm still doing quite some changes, but like not trying to not make them big changes, but more like just the way the visual side of the map
Mm-hmm.
influences the
Because you're still
gameplay
doing
itself.
playtesting, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's gonna be on the Faceit Hubs very soon, like from this Friday,
And that's
I
second
think.
round, right? That's the last round
Yeah,
before the end.
yeah, it is. Which I still need to make quite some progress for, but it'll get there. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is we've not seen it in a while because for some
I
reason
mean,
Valve just is uninterested in the map pool. But there was
yeah,
a little period where there was a lot of big changes to a lot of maps, and like some maps were just being reworked quite often. Like Nuke, when that remake came out, that was reworked. You know, there was sort of like changes where
yeah.
you'd go, "Oh, well, this is a complete map. It's in the active duty or whatever," and then they're still working on it. And I do feel like sometimes it's a bit tricky for us as map makers to go, "Oh, well, you know, even if it is finished, that doesn't mean that you can't just redo an entire bomb site." You know, Valve remade the whole of Vertigo after it had been in the game
Yeah.
for 20 years. So, um, is there a bit of that where you feel like it's you get it to a good enough spot and then just carry on doing any changes that you notice, but you know, it's ready to play?
I feel like with maps, it's an interesting topic because I generally think that there's no reason to like overdo the changes on maps because
Mm-hmm.
people can just adjust to it and learn how to play around quirks of the map itself. But it does need to obviously it needs to reach like a certain level of quality. And I feel like when Nuke was originally remade, even though I wasn't playing back then, looking back on the old versions of Nuke, it is a mess. It is a complete mess, and there is a reason why Valve did all of those changes
Yeah.
to it. Right now, would look at Nuke and you would like if Nuke just suddenly dropped on the workshop and it was a community map and no one has ever seen it before, probably many people would criticize Nuke for a lot of things that
Mm.
it does right now. But people just got used to the way Nuke plays. For example, and okay, before I get into it, like people just got used to the way Nuke plays, and a lot of the parts on the map would not even work like separately outside of the level. Like for example, B site of Nuke I think is such a hideous bomb site, but for some reason it is perfect for Nuke. You know, it
Yeah.
is perfect how it is right now, and it fits into the map. Uh, but generally speaking, like when you look at it, it feels probably would feel amateurish, the same kind of feeling that you would get when the first time you saw Ancient, but somehow the map happens to play really well, and that's because it reaches that certain level of quality, and after that people can just learn and adjust to it. uh I feel like.
Mm. Um, do you feel like that's a disadvantage for community map makers over Valve? Because obviously, when Valve makes a map, they may, you know, everything in the current pool except Anubis was them, right?
Yeah,
And Ancient, they made fully in a lab. You know, they started remaking Aztec, and then went, "This is unsalvageable." Just
yeah.
remade a whole map from scratch, and then just dropped it in the game. Do you think that's a disadvantage that community map makers have, where if there's an obscure thing, or like you say, people just work things out when you're only on the hubs for 2 weeks and you've got to do play tests, you know, and you can get one of those maybe every week if you know, if you get in quickly, but probably every 2 weeks. Do you feel like that's a disadvantage that sort of discourages having unorthodox things in a map? That, you know, like you say, if you drop the nuke layout in a MapCore playtest, you know, the feedback would go on for 40 minutes, and at the end it would be, you know, just reboot the map and do something else with it, because
Yeah,
it's so idiosyncratic and unique. Do you feel like that's a disadvantage, or do you feel like if it gets to a certain level, then it doesn't matter whether it's community or Valve, people will eventually adopt it?
I don't think it matters if it's community or Valve. The biggest problem is mostly the way Valve handles community maps. I feel like really discourages the community from playing them,
Mm-hmm.
because you get a new map enters the game for like 6 months, and most people realize immediately that with every map rotation, these maps are gonna be out of the game after 6 months as well. So most people don't really want to take the time to learn them and to really
Mm-hmm.
like play on them properly, because it's kind of feels like a waste of time sometimes to some of them. I just like playing fun maps and not really thinking about it. But obviously, a big part of Counter-Strike players, are taking things a bit more seriously than that and want to know how to play the map. And
Mm-hmm.
if you have to learn a map, which will eventually get out of the game anyways, that's definitely very discouraging. And I feel like that's probably one of the biggest advantages with this contest is that we've seen Anubis enter the map pool.
Yes.
And I'm like pretty confident that whoever wins the contest and whichever map gets in the game will definitely have like a much bigger advantage because Anubis also made it. So people are a lot
Mm-hmm.
more confident that it can stick in the game and it's not just going to be disappearing in 6 months.
Yeah, it's like it's not a precedent. It's not a promise, but there is a precedent for it happening.
Yeah.
And so you go, right, if I do win this, it is technically possible for it to become an active duty map. Whether it will
Yeah.
or not is yet to be seen. But in theory, it could happen. Go on, you were going to say something else.
Yeah, no, it kind of that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what's sort of your map philosophy going in to Canopy or generally speaking? Do you go in, obviously you've got the environment art bit to you as well. I know some people, so last week I was talking to Kochi and he mainly did environment art and he worked with other people for the layouts primarily. I think he'd been working with Slimek for the layout of Palacio. Whereas obviously you're doing both sides. Do you prefer the environment art? Obviously you come from an art background. You've done a number of skins as well, right? Is that the bit that you prefer and sort of you incidentally have to get on the level design? Or do you map for competitive play and you also just happen to enjoy the aesthetics? Sort of what's your philosophy when you're building a map?
Well, it's pretty interesting because generally, like, I am very interested in both aspects of it, obviously. But when it comes to like the competitiveness of the map, I feel like trying to strike a good balance between the fun and competitive side is very difficult because it's like such a blurry line of not knowing where it starts, where it ends, and what counts as fun, what would counts as a gimmicky kind of deal, and it's just a difficult thing to balance, really. Uh, while aesthetically, I kind of the reason Canopy looks the way it is, I really enjoy like the conceptualization of a map. I really enjoy like trying to come up with a new idea for a map because the one thing that I'm like the most proud of with Canopy and will always be the most proud of is that nothing really looks like Canopy, not in real life, not in video games, not really anywhere. It's mostly a fictional place that I kind of made up and kind of just happens to look like Southern East Asia, like an image of Southern East Asia in your head. Maybe kind of fits that. And I know not everyone goes around making maps this kind of way, and but I am definitely very, very proud of the fact that I feel like it's very original in this aspect, even though like competitively I tried to keep the map in a try to be faithful and like try to bring over aspects from other maps. It's not it's not your most average 3-lane layout you've ever seen, but like it's definitely also not the most unique and creative
It's
one.
still firmly in the 3-lane.
Yeah,
strategy,
it is still firmly like a kind of a four square, so with just some tweaks here and there, But generally it's not a super like crazy map that's super out there. And that was kind of the point when I got into making the layout itself.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like there was a real scramble for theme this one because there was sort of there's a focus, especially in the last competition. I think less so in this competition, but definitely is still there of having a unique theme and a unique looking map, and trying to everyone's sort of trying to avoid the sandbox. There was then the additional challenges of everyone's trying to avoid Soviet era buildings and the sort of sand dust to mirage look. and then also avoiding overlapping with other people's maps, and
Yeah.
so yeah, you feel like you managed to find a solid niche, and it looks really beautiful, and it does sort of, despite being green in a similar way to ancient, it doesn't remotely feel the same. It's got a
Yeah.
very unique feeling to it.
Yeah. I did take a lot of I think Ancient taught me a lot generally when it comes to maps because I was a big critic of Ancient when it originally
Mm-hmm.
released. And I feel like slowly coming to the realization that Ancient actually works as a map and it isn't bad at all. And people enjoy playing it despite it being the most generic Foursquare you've ever seen. It's still with some of the most stupid angles here and there. And yet there's absolutely nothing wrong with the map and I wouldn't really change much on it because it works. So
Tell me a bit about Foursquare. It's not a term I've heard used before.
it's basically like 3 lane, just it's the same term as 3 lane, just the Foursquare implies the existence of the connectors.
Right.
Pretty much that's it.
So it's just you got four squares and then just
Yeah.
connectors between them,
Yeah.
and that makes up the 3 lanes. I see. That's interesting. Um, yeah, and so when you were collecting your inspirations visually for Canopy, obviously you say largely it's from your own imagination. Were there references you got from specific areas of
There are
Southeast Asia?
oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of references that has been used for Canopy, and it's not like a Canopy isn't just like fully my
Sure.
imagination,
Yeah.
obviously. It has used tons of references. It's more about how I combine those and how I try to make
Mm-hmm.
something original out of them. And that's what I'm mostly proud of. But it's mostly from Bali, Indonesia. Now,
Okay.
I did go back on that a bit because I feel like we've never seen Valve add an Asian map to CS before for whatever reason. I don't really know. But I decided after the train rework, which also seems to be very non-specific about its location, that it's probably just better not to try to replicate a real existing place and just
Mm-hmm.
a general area of the world and something more fictional. So
Yeah.
that's why it's
Mm.
more Southern East Asia now and not just Indonesia.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting that you're right. There's sort of a feeling that you should avoid that, and I can't remember whether it was an official thing or whether it was unofficial recommendations, but to avoid making it look like a specific place, just optically, it doesn't necessarily work for Valve, which is so ironic, just given that they made canals, right?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I remember I saw a picture the other day, just like out and about in the world, of what's it called, Venice, and I was like, this person's got a picture of canals on their wall, because it is just that exact. It is just identical. They have
Yes.
copy pasted that area of Google Maps into Hammer and just built it. Um, do you think that's yeah? So do you find that those sort of restrictions that are sort of not communicated, particularly from Valve, but sort of are clearly there a bit in what they choose to put in, do you feel like they factor into when you're making, or you just build it and see what happens?
I do like they definitely play a big factor, but it's more like Valve's like these kind of restrictions. They are so foggy, and like you don't really know where the what they would accept and what they wouldn't accept because they never really communicated regarding
Mm-hmm.
about it. It's just the trends of how they accept maps, but there's also like outlines here and there from what they make and what they accept from the community. But it just seems to be so all over the place that you don't really know, and that's one of the reasons why I decided to kind of shy away from being specific because I know that's definitely not going to hurt the map.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because if the map is more non-specific, it it will not hurt. If it's specific, of
It,
course,
mm,
there's a chance that it does nothing and Valve likes the maps the same exact way, but there might be a chance that
yeah,
they think to themselves, "Let's not do it," you know?
yeah. I think it's super interesting. It's we go right. Well, we've got to divine. Because I think definitely, as artists, there's often a tendency to go, oh, I don't care what other people think. Oh, I'm doing the art for me, and I'm gonna blaze my own trail, and this sort of thing. You get it in music a lot, where
Yeah.
people go, oh, I don't really care if it's popular, that sort of thing. Whereas I think as map makers, it's kind of inherent in the art form that it gets played at the highest level that is possible to be played at. That's the goal, is to get it first into the game, second into the map pool, so then it's on all the tournaments. For me, at least, that seems logical. That for most map makers, that's the goal. And yet, the data that we have to pull from is Cash in 2013 or something, and
Yeah.
then Anubis in 2020 or whatever it
Yeah.
was. Neither of which look anything like each other or have anything in common, but that's the data points we have too. These will get in the map pool. Yeah. Is there sort of do you feel like you would prefer a process that was a bit more clear, or do you find that the total the more or less the total freedom you have, you can try and guess your way around some rules, but they don't really exist, do you find that the total freedom is worth not necessarily knowing what to aim for?
Well, I think every map maker would have a completely different opinion on that.
Mm-hmm.
But personally, I would definitely like some more direction from Valve. Uh, I would not mind having a bit more confidence in what I'm making, uh, and what they would accept into the game. Like having this clear understanding of what I have to do is definitely not gonna hurt the product,
Mm-hmm.
But from the creative side, of course, there's gonna be those who don't really care and just do mapping for the fun of it. Uh, Not many of them, but there are those, and they definitely probably don't. They are perfectly fine with the way things are, probably. So
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. How much are you putting into this? Because you don't do this professionally, right?
yeah,
How much time have you put into this from start to finish? Sort of weekly or in certain bunches.
that's a great question because it has been very all over the place. At the beginning, I definitely worked less on Canopy than I do right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I also did not fully track my numbers, but I do remember that at the beginning of the year on Steam, I had less than 6,000 hours in CS. Right now, I'm well over 7,000,
Mm-hmm.
and I do not play the game a lot at all.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's mostly just mapping, and for the past couple of weeks, I think I started to be not just weeks, actually months now. I think since September, I've mostly been putting in 40-ish hours a week into Canopy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So for you doing full-time hours.
Basically full-time hours.
Mm-hmm.
I only have a part-time job next to this. Uh, it's still 20 hours a week, but it's a part-time job.
Yeah, but you're
So
working 60 hours a week.
yeah,
Yeah.
practically. It's not really exact. It's whenever I feel like working, and
Sure.
obviously I don't confine myself to work days.
Mm-hmm.
So I work on the weekends as well. I don't remember the last time I haven't worked on a day on Canopy. So
I feel like it's an easy thing to do as well. Like, it is still loads of work, but it's one of those that you can do passively. That sort of thing of, right, well, I'm whack some TV on another monitor or whatever, and then go, oh, have I been working on this for 10 hours? I didn't realize.
uh I do wish it would be like that
Do you
because
not have that? Okay.
I kind of have it. I kind of have it, but I think it transitioned me. I mean, Hold up. What am I trying to say? Oh, my brain. Uh, I kind of transitioned throughout the lifetime of Canopy
Mm-hmm.
while I was working on it. Where in the beginning I was a lot more of this kind of person, and now
Right, okay.
I need to be much more focused on what I'm doing. And
Right,
it's
I
probably
see.
because I'm entering that period where it's like art is definitely the much harder part of the map
Mm-hmm.
compared to the layout part, at least in my opinion. Because layout is so much like you've got a lot more freedom with that. But when it comes to the art, you actually need to pay attention to what you're doing. And if you're not fully experienced in everything that you are doing, you will have a more difficult time, like trying to think about it. And you need some space to yourself sometimes. And watching something on the side really distracts me from that. So
yeah, so
now
you
it's a
sort of
lot more
you're
difficult.
really in the weeds now, where it's okay. The sort of fun. Oh, I can sort of mess around. Oh, what does this do if I do this? That's sort of gone out the window, and now you're on the okay. I'm working on this wall, and if I make it too green, then the visibility is going to be terrible. Okay, but I need to balance that. Is that sort of where you're at now, of sort of very intricate things?
It's not just, it's kind of like that. So yeah, but it's not just like the super
Go on.
like it's it's this difficulty of having to work sometimes on stuff that you haven't really done before or you don't have that much experience with.
Okay.
I definitely improved a lot in ZBrush, for example, thanks to Canopy. Uh,
So tell me what
and
about ZBrush.
it's just a sculpting program.
Okay.
Uh, and learning other programs, like I also was much worse at Blender at the beginning of starting Canopy, and now I definitely have gained a lot more experience with it. And I think when you're learning something, you have to actively focus on that certain thing. So it makes it much more difficult to look at something on the side.
Yes.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, how much as a percentage of Canopy would you reckon is? Because I remember you said a lot of it is meshes, and then how much
Yeah.
do you think is assets you've either made or imported?
It it has changed quite a bit since last time it was out on the workshop. Uh, I've worked on a lot of assets at this point, and I feel like I will have a lot to show for in my portfolio after I'm done.
Yes.
So that's to me
The eternal reason we all
matters a
do
lot.
this is
Yeah, there is.
further improvement.
It's mostly at this point a lot of the originally a lot of the textures were my textures. I feel like I started using a lot more scan textures and stuff that other people made for the texture, but all of the models are mine and all of the assets are mostly made by me. So it's a lot of work and it's a lot to think about.
Do you get a certain pride? I know this is sort of a thing, definitely in music, and I feel like in other creative professions, of there's a certain pride and maybe even narcissism in the. I definitely do this a lot of the. Oh, I want people to go. Oh, you know, he actually did everything. You know, that sort of
Oh,
feeling of
yeah.
it's not. You know, it's if it's a team, that's kind of cool. You get to work with other people. But if you do it all yourself, they go, you know, there was like 4 people teams in this, and YNEL was just doing it all by himself. Do you get a bit of that?
I do get a bit of that, but it's also important that other people have made stuff for the map,
Yes.
even though it's like mostly me. It is mostly me. I still don't want to like completely uh, isolate myself that I was the only one really working on this because the project would definitely not look the same without Darivan, even though he hasn't nearly made as much as I did. He still had a high influence on the project. And generally speaking, I do have this narcissism of, yeah, this was me. This was all me. And I would
And
be
I think you
loving to
need
say
it.
that.
I think it's the thing that makes creative people and artists work well. Is so don't misunderstand that as an insult. I think it's
Yeah,
super
no, no, no.
necessary, but also it
Absolutely,
is like the
I
thing
agree.
that brings us down. Where you go, oh well, I want to work all by myself, and then you go, right, well, there's this really talented guy over here that could help me, but I want to do it.
Yeah,
I mean, it sounds like you've taken people on when they've been helpful.
yeah. I have. One of the most interesting additions also to this was probably Etchy, one of the a guy who made models for Canopy.
All right, okay.
At this point, I replaced everything that he made, and there is no longer a single asset from him on the map, which definitely makes me feel bad for the guy to a certain extent. But at the same time, it also gives me this pride of, wow, this guy is a professional modeler, and I feel like my assets work better for what I made.
Hmm.
And there is that kind of narcissism and kind of ego that I possess in this regard, where I like, but I made this.
Oh, you
I
made
made
it,
this,
man.
and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I mean, and it does look terrific. Like, I remember, I feel like I've seen you post a number of screenshots as it's going along, and loads of it just mesh work, which is crazy to me. Because when people look at this, I've got some a video going as well on screen, and I think it is hard to comprehend for anyone that's used Hammer, especially Hammer One. It makes a bit more sense than Hammer Two, but Hammer One, of just going right. Okay, lots of this wasn't imported from a professional model. You know, you go right. Well, this was just using meshes. Did you find the transition between Hammer One and Two? Because presumably you did use Hammer One a decent
Yeah,
amount.
I used Hammer One a lot, but or well, and now I think the second we got Source 2, I had a bit of a hard time like getting used to it originally, but because I was kind of like forced into it so suddenly, I
Mm-hmm.
think after a couple of weeks, I started realizing how much I like the way the new Hammer feels, and uh, and now I there is absolutely zero chance I could possibly ever go back because it is so beyond superior and like completely unthinkable how I was even capable of working with brushes. It just doesn't make sense in my head anymore. So it was an interesting transition, but it definitely paid off, and I'm very happy we have what we have right now because it's so nice to use.
Mm-hmm.
Though it is getting more and more unstable with the more complex Canopy gets, and it's getting pretty frustrating at some points how many times it crashes.
Sure. Have you had any big losses, or are you good at saving?
I'm pretty good at saving, and actually the biggest like thing that like pulls me back is myself because I, for whatever reason, have a habit of instead of hiding objects, I delete them. And
Right.
sometimes
Okay.
I accidentally delete stuff from the map and save and go on with my day for like uh forever, and then suddenly I realize, holy hell, this entire roof section is missing. What did I do to it? I deleted all of it by accident, and I have to redo all of it,
And you
and
go,
then I
can't
feel
control
very
Z.
annoyed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it was 7 hours
so
ago. Yeah.
yeah, I do that sometimes, but actual hammer crashes and problems with that, I don't lose that much progress with, luckily.
That's good. Yeah. So how have you found uh, playtesting? Because I think one of the really interesting things in the creative process is feedback is like really hard to manage, right? There's
Yeah,
there's you put a lot of yourself into it, and so not only does feedback, it sort of goes, this isn't as good as you thought it was, which is like the first layer of oof, that hurt. Then there's the second layer of, oh, this thing feels like a part of me. And so feedback often I find feels insulting, even though it's not. But that's sort of how it feels. And then the third thing is like trying to work out, are these people right? You know, are they right? Is this just their, what they're bringing to it? And I'm not sure I agree. How do you find feedback, and how do you find the right balance between taking feedback on and sticking with your original thoughts?
that's an interesting question because I think generally I am very nonchalant when it comes to playtesting.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout the like my mapping, I wouldn't call it a career, but like my time in mapping,
Mm-hmm.
I I have done a lot of playtesting, and I've gotten very used to the like way people talk about the map, and I don't feel like there's much. I don't feel that rudeness to it, and I don't feel like I don't have any of that. God, this didn't work out, and I feel sad now. It's I very quickly move on from that, and I kind of just listen.
Mm-hmm.
But I also don't pay as much attention to the individual feedbacks of anyone as other mappers do, probably. I am a lot more interested in just looking at the things people do and how the match goes.
Okay.
Um, I do obviously pay attention to what people say, but a big part of me like instantly compares to how the playtest itself has went, and there is always gonna be that kind of opinion where it's never gonna be. No one has like perfect opinions.
Hmm.
I don't know how else to say that.
I know what you mean.
Whenever
Yeah.
you format your opinions, it's not always clear if you even agree with them. That like what I noticed from when I'm giving feedback to other maps. Sometimes I'm just yapping and I don't realize that it's not really the problem with the map that I'm talking about, but just kind of how I feel in the moment.
It's that you
And
got killed 10 times by the same guy, and you go,
a
oh, this
bit of
map
that,
sucks.
yeah. A bit of that, and also just like this thinking of, yeah, I know this issue, but I don't feel like many of the people know the issues. What I
Hmm.
mostly pay attention to is what they find an issue with, and I
Right, I
try to
see.
figure out the reason myself, because I don't feel like the reason is ever correct when it comes to playtesting feedback.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's in economics, there's this interesting idea of revealed preference. So the idea is that you go, what people report as their preference is really unreliable. So if I said, I really like Dust 2, but I never play Dust 2, for instance. I say I really like Dust 2, but I still play Mirage 9 out of 10 times when I'm selecting on competitive. The idea is that my revealed preference is Mirage, even though my reported preference is Dust 2. And it sounds like you sort of have a similar idea there of there's sort of something the reporting is valuable, but equally it's when you watch the game that you see what you see that they're avoiding this area or that kind of thing. Is that about right?
Kind of, yeah. But it's also more about the fact, like, a lot of the times, playtesters try to give a reason as to why they
Okay.
dislike something, and they completely miss on the reason.
Hmm.
Like, they don't, like, even if I completely agree with what I dislike about certain things, they usually try to give you some sort of explanation as to what makes it not work and what makes it
Hmm.
work. And it's what I tend to notice is that usually changing something else in a different way is is really healthy to the map
Hmm.
and still addressing the issue that they were facing originally.
Yeah. How do you feel about because people often give solutions as well? Do you feel like they're often very helpful or not so much?
That's the thing that is most of the time not super helpful, but sometimes here and there tends to be something that someone says, and I suddenly go, "Hey, that's a great idea," and then I do it. Uh, but it's not often, so
Sure. Very good. Yeah. So hopefully it's going to do well in the contest. I mean, I think you're pretty far ahead of most people. You know, there's the 10% that have dropped out. There's the middle portion of people who have half-hearted it but can't really be asked, and then there's you and a few other maps that have got quite far ahead with arting, and you're pretty set on layout. Uh, what are your plans after the competition? Presumably you're going to try and finish Canopy by the end of the competition. So what are
yeah,
you
yeah.
what are you aiming for afterwards?
Well, with Canopy, like one of the biggest things I set out to do was to make something that was really portfolio worthy. At
Hmm.
this point, I've worked so much, and I feel like I'm getting just really tired of not making money out of it.
Yeah.
So I will definitely be trying to look for a job, um, because I think with Canopy, I'll have to have at least enough experience, maybe to find something somewhere, even if it's just something freelance,
Hmm.
but to finally get started making at least some money, because right now having to work as a mailman isn't the most fun part of my day. Uh, and then there's just a lot of work to not do all of this. But with CS mapping, it's going to be a very weird thing, because I really want to get away from mapping itself,
Okay.
because I have found so many different things I'm interested in. Well, more specifically, illustration is something I really want to do. But because of how much time and creative energy I spend on mapping, I really cannot properly focus on it and really
Right. Okay.
cannot develop the way I wish to. And I feel like if there was more structure to my life instead of just this hobbyist mindset of working on a map on my own free time whenever I can,
Mm-hmm.
then I could probably find a better balance, and that's probably something being uh like that's probably something that would be a lot easier if I had a proper job,
Yeah.
because then there would be a clear separation between what's my work and what's my free time, and I could get to spend my free time the way I wish to. So I don't know how much I'll be mapping for CS generally, because I don't really want to get into this kind of mindset
Yeah.
again. And that's why I mostly call Canopy kind of my final map, because I just don't feel like I have this possibility of just continuing on with my life like this. Uh, but I will definitely be still in the mapping sphere,
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm not gonna be working on projects like Canopy ever again.
Yeah. Do you feel like you would come back if there was another competition?
Probably as part of a team,
Yeah.
but not making
Again,
a map.
assuming that this is in like 4 years, not
Yeah,
you know.
but definitely not as a solo project. No.
Cool. Yeah. Brilliant. So if you want to plug anything, presumably you share your art somewhere. Yeah. Just if there's anything you want to say, anything you want to plug, just go for it.
Well, there's not much to plug, but follow my Blue Sky at YNEL.art. That is it. That's where I post all of my stuff.
Cool. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on. Very good luck in the competition. This is YNEL, creator of Canopy. Yeah, brilliant.